In the village of Mwanga, the grand compound of Mwanga stood proudly at the edge of a rolling hill, surrounded by the scent of jasmine and the sounds of bustling life. Today, a most peculiar event was taking place outside her home. 6 beautiful young women, all 25 years old, stood in line, their expressions ranging from curiosity to anxiety. The sun cast its golden light over the scene as Mwanga, a powerful and respected matron of the village, prepared to begin her unusual selection process. The front yard was dominated by an unusual object, a tall, life-sized womanly figure made from hardboard, with a large hole carved out from the hips downward. It stood as the focus of attention, raising questions in the minds of the girls. Mwanga, draped in a vibrant kitenge, observed the women with sharp, calculating eyes. Beside her stood a muscular and handsome young man, his physique an undeniable contrast to the figure in the wheelchair just out of sight. The women, dazzled by the young man's good looks and confident stance, could not take their eyes off him. They assumed he was Mwanga's son, the man they were competing for. Mwanga raised her hand, signaling the first girl to step forward. Sophie, with her elegant posture and flowing traditional gown, approached the wooden figure. There was an air of awkwardness as she tried to position herself behind the figure, aligning her body with the exaggerated curves of the hardboard woman. Mwanga watched closely, nodding in approval as Sophie's hips fit the hole snugly. The tension was palpable, but the girls couldn't resist the unspoken pressure. Each woman was called one by one, each of them fitting their bodies behind the figure. As the next girl, Osha, approached, she tried to mask her nervousness. She hesitated for a moment, but then complied. She fit behind the figure, her body barely touching the edges of the large, curved hole. Mwanga scrutinized her before motioning for her to step aside. Finally, Shoni, the last of the 6, walked toward the figure. She was strong-willed but felt uncomfortable about this strange test. She fit her frame behind the hardboard figure with an uneasy look. Mwanga examined her as she did the others, her face betraying no emotion. After the process was complete, Mwanga stood before the 6 women, her voice booming across the yard. "I have made my decision. Only 3 of you will remain." She pointed to Sophie, Osha, and Shoni, who stood still, stunned by the selection. The remaining 3, disappointed, quietly left the compound. The chosen 3 exchanged anxious glances, unsure of what was to come. Then, Mwanga turned to the handsome young man who had been standing by her side, his chiseled muscles glistening under the sunlight. The girls watched him, anticipation clear in their eyes. It seemed that they were about to win over the heart of this perfect man. But just as the moment of triumph began to settle in, Mwanga's voice cut through the tension with unexpected words. "This man," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "is not my son." The shock rippled through the 3 women like a wave. Their eyes widened in disbelief, the man's handsome face now irrelevant to their future. Mwanga turned to the edge of the veranda. "My son is here," she continued, calling him forward. A gentle breeze stirred as Jabari, her real son, rolled his wheelchair forward, a calm but firm expression on his face. His legs were paralyzed, his body scarred from an illness that had robbed him of his mobility many years ago. Yet, his presence was commanding in its own way. "You thought you were here to win the heart of that man," Mwanga said, pointing once again to her guard. "But no. My son, Jabari, is the man you are vying for. He is the one whose heart you must win, and the one who will be the father of my grandchildren." The revelation landed heavily on the 3 women, their earlier enthusiasm dampened by the unexpected truth. Jabari was not the man they had imagined competing for, but the decision had been made. The competition had just begun, and now, they would have to reconsider everything they thought they wanted. After the shocking reveal of Jabari as Mwanga's real son, the tension in the air was thick. Mama Nia, standing tall and unshaken by the reactions of the three women, Sophie, Osha, and Shani, called her son to her side. "Jabari, go to your room and wait. I will send each of them to you, one by one," she said, her voice firm. Jabari nodded, wheeling himself away into the large, cool room at the back of the house. The women watched him disappear behind the door, their faces reflecting nervousness, excitement, and uncertainty. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Mama Nia looked at the three and asked, "So, who will go first?" Sophie, always eager to prove herself, stepped forward with excitement. Her eyes glinted with determination as she strode toward the room. The other two watched her closely, both curious and unsure of what was to come. Sophie entered the dimly lit room, a nervous smile playing on her lips. Jabari sat by the window, the soft light highlighting his calm but serious expression. She approached him, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. As she got close, Jabari raised his hand, signaling her to stop. Before anything, he began, his voice steady, "I need to ask you something." Sophie blinked, confused by the sudden shift in tone. "Yes. What is it?" Jabari's gaze didn't waver. "If we have a child, will you change the diapers? Will you take care of the child when they cry in the middle of the night?" Sophie shifted uncomfortably, a hint of frustration creeping into her expression. "Do we really need to talk about that right now? Let's just get on with it." Jabari's eyes narrowed. "I need to know if you are ready to take responsibility. Will you breastfeed the child? Will you take care of our family?" Sophie let out a small, impatient sigh. "This isn't the time to talk about those things. We can figure it out later." Jabari, his patience clearly tested, shook his head. "If you can't answer me now, you won't be able to handle it later. Please leave." Stunned, Sophie blinked, unsure of how to react. But his words were final. Defeated, she turned and left the room, her excitement evaporating. Osha was next. She entered the room in a dramatic flourish, wearing a traditional lasso wrap, adorned with bright colors, and tied around her waist like a dancing skirt. As she stepped into the room, she began to move rhythmically, swaying her hips and letting the fabric flow around her as if she were performing for an audience. Her eyes sparkled with confidence as she danced closer to Jabari. She circled his wheelchair like a dancer teasing a partner, her movements calculated to draw his attention. Osha was determined to seduce her way into the wealthy life Mama Nia had promised. Jabari watched her closely, and as she drew nearer, he raised his hand, stopping her mid-dance. "Osha, before anything happens, I need to ask you the same thing I asked Sophie," he said, his tone serious. Osha paused, annoyed that her seductive plan was interrupted. "What is it?" Jabari, unshaken by her irritation, repeated the question. "Will you take care of our child? Will you change the diapers, feed the baby, and stay up with them at night?" Osha's smile faded. "Why does that matter right now? I didn't come here to discuss babies. I came here to win. I want the status and the life that comes with being your wife." Jabari's face darkened at her words. "Then you're not ready to be the mother of my children. Please leave the room." Osha, stunned by his rejection, spun around and stormed out, her dramatic entrance ending in an equally dramatic exit. Now it was Shani's turn. The quietest of the three, she walked into the room with a slow, deliberate step. She approached Jabari, her hands trembling as she reached out and placed her hand on his. But then, she quickly drew it back, stepping away. Jabari noticed her hesitation and looked at her curiously. "What's wrong, Shani?" Shani swallowed hard, her face conflicted. "I can't do this." "Then why did you enter the competition? Jabari asked, his voice gentle but firm. Shani took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. I had no choice. My family, they are facing deportation. If I don't marry, I won't be able to stay in this country. I don't want to do this. But I felt like I had no other option. Jabari's expression softened. He admired her honesty, the raw truth behind her words. I appreciate you telling me the truth. It takes courage to stand by your principles. Don't worry, I won't force you into anything you don't want. You're free to go. Shani nodded, relief washing over her face. She quietly left the room, her heart lighter for having spoken the truth. As the three women gathered once again in the garden, the atmosphere was tense. Sophie and Osha still seemed frustrated, while Shani stood silently, lost in thought. Mwanga appeared, her regal figure commanding attention once more. Well, girls, she said, her voice sharp and clear, that's it for today. I'll see you again in 9 months. You may go. Her words struck like a hammer. The competition had not ended, but had only just begun. The women exchanged glances, each understanding that the stakes were now higher than they could have imagined. One by one, they left the compound, their futures uncertain but forever changed by the events of the day. 9 months had passed since that fateful day in Mwanga, and the three women, Sophie, Osha, and Shani, once again stood in front of Mwanga's grand house. The air was thick with tension, as everyone anticipated the final judgment. Behind Mwanga stood her muscular bodyguard, and beside her was Jabari, sitting calmly in his wheelchair, his face composed but watchful. Posture relaxed, with no outward signs of pregnancy. Her face remained neutral, watching the events unfold with quiet anticipation. Mwanga walked forward, her eyes sharp as she approached Sophie first. She paused for a moment, studying the swollen belly before her. A smile crept onto Sophie's face, clearly thinking she had won the competition. So, I see some of you managed to get pregnant, Mwanga said coldly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Sophie nodded, but before she could say a word, Mwanga raised the pen she had been holding and pressed it firmly against Sophie's belly. The pen pierced through the fabric, and with a sudden pop, the belly deflated like a balloon. Sophie's face paled as the truth was exposed. I do not like lies, Mwanga said with a quiet fury. Leave this place. Now. Sophie, humiliated and defeated, lowered her head and quickly walked away from the compound, her face burning with shame. Next, Mwanga turned her attention to Osha, who immediately spoke up, her voice trembling. Please, my baby is real, Osha pleaded, clutching her stomach protectively. I swear it's real. Mwanga eyed her carefully and then looked at her son, who remained silent. Yes, I know the child is real, Mwanga said, her voice low but clear. But it's not Jabari's. Osha froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Mwanga's eyes shifted to her bodyguard, and in that moment, the truth was laid bare for all to see. The bodyguard, who had been standing rigid and silent throughout the ordeal, shifted uncomfortably. You, Mwanga said, pointing toward the bodyguard, her tone filled with disgust, have betrayed my trust. You may leave this place as well. You're fired. The bodyguard, knowing there was no escaping the consequences of his actions, nodded and left without another word. Osha, realizing her deception had been exposed, wept softly as she followed him, her dreams of marrying into wealth now shattered. Now only Shani remained, standing alone in front of Mwanga and Jabari. She looked at the two of them, already anticipating what was coming. I understand, Shani said quietly, I'll go too. I couldn't meet your requirements. She turned to leave, but Jabari's voice stopped her. Wait. Shani turned back, surprised by his calm tone. Jabari looked at her with a mixture of admiration and kindness. The truth is, he began, "My mother knows that I can't have children." Shani's eyes widened, confusion written across her face. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Mama Nia stepped closer, her expression softening for the first time since the competition began. "You are the only one who didn't deceive us," she said, her tone warmer now. "You didn't lie or try to manipulate the situation. You stayed true to yourself, even when things were difficult." Jebori nodded. "I don't know if our relationship will work out, Shani," he admitted, his voice honest and sincere. "But I promise you this, I'll do everything I can to make sure you're not deported. I admire your courage and your honesty. That means more to me than any competition." Shani blinked back tears, her heart swelling with relief and gratitude. She hadn't expected this, but the sincerity in Jebori's voice gave her hope. Mama Nia, standing beside her son, smiled for the first time that day. "We will make sure you are taken care of, Shani. You don't have to face this alone anymore." Shani nodded, her heart full of emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time since entering the competition, she felt like she truly belonged. The weight of her fears and uncertainties began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope for the future. As the sun began to set over Mwanga, Shani stood by Jebori's side, knowing that, while their future was uncertain, it would be built on trust and truth, foundations far stronger than any competition. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one.